My sister-in-law, Tiffany, was a master of the slow poison of the soul. For years, she had been administering it in tiny, almost undetectable doses. A backhanded compliment here, a thinly veiled insult there, all delivered with a smile so bright it could deflect any accusation. But tonight she was holding out a plate, and on it was a slice of red velvet cake, a perfect blood-red slice with a swirl of cream cheese frosting. And for the first time, I wondered if her poison had become literal. The dining room was a chaotic symphony of family life. Laughter, the clinking of silverware, my uncle telling a story for the 10th time. But in the space between Tiffany and me, a pocket of absolute silence formed. Her smile was stretched just a fraction too wide, her eyes locked on mine with an unnerving intensity. "Amber," she cooed, her voice like honey laced with something sharp. "I baked this just for you." The cake looked innocent. It looked thoughtful. But Tiffany had never been thoughtful, not with me. Every interaction was a chess move, and I was always the one being put in check. Her words, dripping with that fake, sugary warmth, were a dare, a challenge to refuse. All around us, the family was blissfully unaware of the silent standoff. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Her eyes never left my face, and in their depths, I saw it. Not the pride of a baker, but a flicker of something dark and predatory. It was the look of a spider waiting for the fly to land. I forced a smile, making sure my voice was light and breezy. "Wow, Tiffany, this looks incredible. You really didn't have to." Her lips twitched, fighting back a smirk. "Of course I did. I know how much you love red velvet." I didn't, and she was well aware of that. For years, this was her game. The little jabs, the subtle cruelties that were always just deniable enough to make me question my own sanity. At first, I had told myself it was just her personality. Some people are just prickly, right? But the pattern became impossible to ignore. There was the time she had loudly announced to a table full of relatives that I had filled out after the holidays. The time she had accidentally spilled a glass of red wine on the new blue dress I had been so excited to wear. The way she would laugh just a little too loudly when recounting an embarrassing story from my past to new friends. It was always a joke, always followed by a dismissive wave of her hand if I ever looked hurt. And now, here she was, with this perfect slice of cake, made just for me. My eyes darted back to the plate. My gut was screaming that something was wrong, but to refuse would be to start a war. Tiffany was a professional victim. She could twist any situation to make me look like the ungrateful, paranoid villain. I was not about to hand her that victory on a silver platter, so I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up the fork, and with a steady hand, I sliced the cake cleanly in half. I smiled at her, a sweet, genuine-looking smile. "You know, Harper absolutely adores red velvet cake. She should have some of this, too." Tiffany's entire body went rigid. It was a micro-expression, a flash of pure, unadulterated panic that she couldn't suppress. Her fingers clenched around the handle of the serving knife on the table. Her smile faltered, a crack in the perfect facade. "Oh no," she said, her voice suddenly high and thin. "It's very rich. I don't think she'd like it." I turned to my niece, Harper, who was sitting across the table, kicking her small legs under her chair. "Do you want some cake, sweetie?" Harper's face lit up. "Yeah." Before Tiffany could utter another word of protest, I slid half of the slice onto Harper's small dessert plate. The color drained from Tiffany's face. I watched her, my stomach churning with a cold dread. This was a woman who never lost her cool. She always had a witty comeback, a practiced eye roll, a way of controlling every room she was in. But not now. Now she was frozen, her fork hovering uselessly in her hand, her eyes wide with a horror she couldn't conceal. She stared at Harper as if her daughter had just swallowed a vial of poison. A thick, heavy silence fell over our corner of the table. The surrounding chatter of the family faded into a dull roar. Harper, oblivious to the high-stakes drama unfolding, took a happy bite of the cake. Tiffany's lips parted as if to scream, but no sound came out. It was too late. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was in that cake? Tiffany finally snapped out of her trance, swallowing hard. She forced a laugh, but it was a brittle, shaky sound. "I hope you like it, sweetie," she said, her voice strained. Harper just nodded, her mouth full. "It's yummy." Tiffany barely registered it. Her gaze shot back to me, her eyes darting between my plate and the one in front of her daughter. I could practically see the frantic gears turning in her head, the panicked calculations. Then, as if realizing she was trapped, she picked up her own fork. With a slow, deliberate motion, she took a tiny bite of the remaining cake. She smiled, but it was a dead thing, an empty gesture that didn't come close to reaching her eyes. The unease inside me solidified into a cold, hard certainty. What had I just narrowly avoided? I didn't touch my piece of the cake. I couldn't. My hand trembled as I set my fork down, forcing myself to look casual. Tiffany had put something in that cake. I needed to know what, and I needed to know why. The rest of the dinner was a blur. Tiffany kept darting terrified glances at Harper, her face a pale, strained mask. I could feel her watching me too, waiting. But waiting for what? I didn't know. My appetite was gone, replaced by a leaden weight in my gut. I kept my expression neutral, a calm surface over the storm raging inside me. But I felt it, a cold dread creeping up my spine, a nagging voice in my head whispering that I had just dodged something terrible. Tiffany barely spoke another word all evening. She sat stiff as a board, her knuckles white around the stem of her wine glass, her smile a distant memory. She would flinch at every little sound Harper made. I should have called her out right then and there, demanded to know why she looked like she was watching a time bomb. But I didn't. Not yet. I just watched her. I wanted her to feel my eyes on her, to let her squirm in the knowledge that I knew. And she did. She refused to meet my gaze for the rest of the night. When the evening finally wound down, I went to get my coat. As I reached for it, I heard soft footsteps behind me. Amber. Her voice was different now, quiet, hesitant. Not the usual brash confidence she projected. I turned slowly. She stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, her face a carefully constructed blank slate. "You didn't eat your cake," she stated, her words measured. I raised an eyebrow. I wasn't hungry. Her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. "You're overthinking this. Overthinking." A small, humorless laugh escaped my lips. That was her go-to phrase, her weapon of choice for dismissing my feelings, for making me feel crazy. I had heard it 1,000 times. When she had accidentally shared a secret I had told her in confidence, I was overthinking it. When she had made a joke about my husband being out of my league in front of everyone, I was just being too sensitive. It was always the same tired script. But this time was different. This wasn't a backhanded compliment or a spilled drink. This was something else, something that had terrified her. I took a slow step towards her, lowering my voice. Am I? For a split second, I saw that flicker of fear in her eyes again. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that tight, forced smile. "I was just trying to do something nice for you," she said, "and you had to turn it into something weird. Weird." I bit back the flood of accusations I wanted to hurl at her. Not yet. I just smiled. Right. Must be my overactive imagination. Tiffany studied me for a long moment before letting out a small, strained laugh. "You're impossible," she muttered, shaking her head as she turned and walked away. I let her go, because I knew, with absolute certainty, that Tiffany was hiding something, and I was not going to let it go. The drive home was eerily quiet. My husband, Justin, was in a great mood, chattering on about how nice the dinner was, completely oblivious to the silent war that had just been waged. I just hummed in agreement, my mind a million miles away, replaying every moment, every flicker of panic on Tiffany's face. I had spent years swallowing her cruelty, convincing myself it was my fault that I was too sensitive. It had started small, so small I barely registered it. The first time was at a Christmas party. I was wearing a simple blue dress I loved. Tiffany had smiled at me, leaned in, and whispered, "That's a brave choice." Not many people could pull that color off. I had laughed it off, but the comments kept coming, little drops of acid eroding my confidence. When I got a big promotion at work, she had said, "Wow, I never pictured you as the corporate type. Good for you." When I brought a homemade pie to a potluck, she had tasted it and asked, "Oh, this is nice. Did you use a box mix?" Each time, she would watch for my reaction, a little gleam in her eye. She enjoyed it. Tonight had been different. She had escalated her game from psychological warfare to something far more sinister. I gripped the steering wheel, the unease inside me hardening into cold resolve. "Hey," Justin said, glancing over. "You okay? You've been quiet." I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." He nodded, not pressing. And maybe that was on me. I had never told him the full story. He knew Tiffany and I weren't best friends, but he didn't know about the relentless, quiet campaign she had been waging against me for years. He didn't know how many times I had smiled through her insults, how much I had learned to internalize, but I wasn't internalizing this. Not this time. When we got home, I carefully took the napkin-wrapped piece of cake from my purse and placed it on the kitchen counter. It looked so harmless. But I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overthinking. Something was terribly wrong, and I was going to find out what it was. I stood in my silent kitchen, the only sound the low hum of the refrigerator, staring at that slice of cake. Justin was asleep upstairs, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I slowly unwrapped the napkin. The frosting was a little smudged, but it still looked perfect. Was I being paranoid? Had years of Tiffany's taunts finally broken me? I picked up my phone, my fingers hesitating before I typed signs of food tampering into the search bar. The results were a mix of the obvious strange smells, bitter tastes, and the subtle, things that could easily be missed. I leaned in, sniffing the cake. Nothing. No chemical smell, no odd discoloration. But that meant nothing. My mind kept flashing back to Tiffany's face, that mask of pure horror when Harper took a bite. That was real. That wasn't in my head. If this was just another of her cruel games, she wouldn't have cared. This was more. My heart began to pound. I needed proof. The next morning, I placed the cake into a Ziploc bag and put it in my purse. A short drive later, I was standing in a small, private medical testing facility. I had called ahead, inventing a story about a severe food allergy and needing a sample tested for potential cross-contamination. A woman in a white lab coat took the bag from me. "You want this tested for allergens?" she asked. "Yes," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I have a severe reaction to certain ingredients. I just need to be sure. We can run a full toxicological and allergen panel. It will take a couple of days," she said, her expression unreadable. That was fine. I could wait. I spent the day in a restless fog. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept circling back to Tiffany. Late that afternoon, my phone rang. I stared at the screen. It was her. She never called me. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I had to know. I answered. "Hello?" A pause. "Hey." Her voice was strained, stripped of its usual bravado. "Hey," I replied, my voice steady. Another pause. "So, Harper felt a little sick last night." My grip on the phone tightened. "What do you mean?" Tiffany let out a shaky sigh. "Just a stomachache. It's probably nothing. But I was thinking." She hesitated, then forced a nervous laugh. "Maybe it was the cake." I kept my voice even, cool. "Maybe." "You did say it was rich." She laughed again, a high, false sound. "Yeah, exactly." The silence stretched between us. I knew what she was doing. She was fishing, trying to see if I suspected anything. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. "Is she feeling better now?" I asked. "Oh yeah, totally fine this morning," she answered, way too quickly. I could picture her pacing her pristine kitchen, twisting a strand of hair, a nervous habit she had. "Good," I said calmly. "Kids have sensitive stomachs." Another pause, and then, so quiet I almost missed it. "You didn't eat any, did you?" The question hung in the air, heavy and cold. It wasn't concern. It was a need for information. Slowly, I set my coffee mug down. "No," I said, keeping my voice light. "Like I said, I wasn't that hungry." Tiffany let out a breath, a soft whoosh of what sounded like pure relief. And in that moment, I knew. She had done something. She had expected me to eat that cake, and my failure to do so had thrown her into a panic. I let her stew in the silence for a moment before I spoke. "Well, I'm glad Harper's okay. Maybe it was just something she ate earlier." "Yeah," Tiffany murmured, "probably." Another awkward beat. "Okay, well, I'll talk to you later." The line went dead. I put my phone down, my hands perfectly steady, my mind eerily calm. She had just confirmed everything without even realizing it. She had no idea that a piece of her perfect red velvet cake was sitting in a lab. She thought she was in the clear, but she had no idea what was coming for her. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind. Why? Why would she do this? I replayed every cruel comment, every passive-aggressive jab, searching for a clue that could explain this escalation. The cake sat in a lab, and the results felt like a ticking clock. I couldn't wait. The next morning, I drove to her house. The place was immaculate, a perfect suburban dream. It was a facade, just like her. I knocked firmly. When she opened the door, her face flickered from surprise to a deep, primal unease. "Amber," she said, forcing a smile. "What a surprise." "I thought I'd stop by," I said, walking past her into the house. "You seemed a little off last night." Her grip tightened on her coffee mug. "Off? Yeah. You looked terrified when Harper ate that cake. Then you called me this morning. It just seemed odd." She let out that thin, shaky laugh again. "Oh, come on. You know how I am. I was just worried it was too rich. I didn't want Harper getting a stomachache. She was a good liar, but I'd spent years studying her tells. The way her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine, the slight twitch in her hand. I decided to go for the throat. I sent the cake for testing. Tiffany froze. Her knuckles went white against the ceramic of her mug. "You what?" I watched her, my gaze unwavering. I had a feeling something was off. So I took a piece to a lab. They should have the results for me soon. For a second, she was silent. The air crackled with tension. Then, she let out a sharp, brittle laugh. "That's insane. You actually think I would do something to your food?" I didn't answer. I just stared. I knew she was expecting me to back down, to say it was a joke. I didn't. "I guess we'll find out soon enough," I said softly. The color drained from her face, and for the first time since I had known her, Tiffany was utterly speechless. I left her house feeling a cold, steely determination. She was cracking. As I pulled into my own driveway, my phone buzzed. An email. My stomach did a flip. The lab results. My eyes scanned the PDF, my breath catching in my throat when I saw the line item. Significant traces of a potent sedative found in sample. My hands started to shake. She did it. She had actually drugged my food. I had imagined an irritant, a laxative, something petty and mean. But a sedative? This was deliberate. This was dangerous. My pulse pounded in my temples. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was a criminal act. I stood there in my driveway, the sun warm on my skin, but a deep, icy cold spread through my veins. Tiffany had crossed a line, and she had no idea that she'd just handed me the weapon to burn her entire world to the ground. I stood frozen in my driveway, the phone gripped so tightly my knuckles were bone white. The words on the screen seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, a potent sedative. I swallowed, but my throat was dry. This wasn't a sick joke. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. A wave of nausea washed over me as the what-ifs crashed down. What if I had eaten it? What if Harper had eaten the whole slice instead of just a bite? A hot, furious anger surged through me, burning away the shock. For years, I had been her punching bag, absorbing her quiet cruelty and telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But this was attempted harm, and she was going to face me. I didn't think, I just acted. I was back in my car, the engine roaring, my foot pressing the gas harder than necessary. I had given her a chance to come clean. I had looked her in the eye and offered an out. She had chosen to lie, to laugh, to call me insane. Now she was going to answer for it. When I screeched to a halt in her driveway, I was out of the car before the engine was even off. I didn't knock. I pounded on the door, the sound sharp and demanding in the quiet suburban street. Seconds later, the door swung open. Tiffany stood there, dressed in leggings and a sweater. Her expression shifted from startled to recognition to raw fear. She knew. "Amber," she began, her voice a weak attempt at calm. "What are you—" I shoved my phone in her face. "Read it." She blinked, flinching back. "What? Read." "It," I repeated, my voice low and menacing. Her eyes dropped to the screen. I watched her face as she scanned the words. The color drained away, her body went rigid, and a soft, breathy sound escaped her lips. This is ridiculous," she stammered. "I didn't move." "Try again, Tiffany. You're seriously going to believe some random test over. Don't." My voice cracked like a whip. "Do not stand there and gaslight me. Not this time." Her mouth snapped shut. I took another step, backing her into her own entryway. "You put a sedative in that cake. The lab found it. Now you are going to tell me exactly what was going through your head." A dry, humorless chuckle escaped her. "You're acting like I tried to poison you." I held her gaze. "Didn't you?" Her face was chalk white. "Of course not. Then what was it?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing. My chest felt tight with rage. "I could go to the police right now, Tiffany," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "This is evidence. I have proof. So you better start talking." Her breathing grew shallow, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. Finally, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "I didn't mean for it to be serious," she muttered, her eyes fixed on the floor. I scoffed. "Oh, right. Slipping drugs into my food is just a little prank." She swallowed hard. "It was just supposed to make you sick. That's all." A sharp, bitter laugh tore from my throat. "That's all?" She flinched. My hands curled into fists. "Why, Tiffany? Why the hell would you do that?" Her jaw clenched. For a long moment, she was silent. Then slowly, she looked up, and I saw it all. Years of raw, festering resentment, a jealousy so toxic it had finally spilled over. "Because you always win," she whispered. My stomach twisted. "What?" Her voice grew sharper, infused with a bitter venom. "You always get to be the perfect one. Everyone loves you. My parents, my husband, our whole family thinks you're just so wonderful." Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "And no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, I'm always second best. I'm just Tiffany." I stared at her, dumbfounded by the sheer absurdity. "So this was your solution? To drug me? Because of your own pathetic insecurities?" She rubbed a hand over her face. "It wasn't supposed to be a big deal." I shook my head, a wave of disgust washing over me. "You're unbelievable." A thick, suffocating silence fell between us, and then a small voice from the top of the stairs shattered it. "Mommy!" We both froze, turning to see Harper standing there, rubbing her eyes, her hair a mess from a nap. She looked from my furious face to her mother's terrified one. "Why are you yelling?" she asked, her voice trembling. A wave of profound sadness hit me. This was the real tragedy. Tiffany's bitterness, her petty war against me, could have cost her own daughter everything. I turned back to her, my voice dropping to a quiet, firm tone. "I don't care about your reasons, Tiffany. I don't care about your jealousy or whatever twisted logic you used to justify this." I shook my head. "What I care about is that you crossed a line you can never, ever come back from." Her eyes darkened. So what? You're going to ruin my life now? I took a slow breath and a step back. No, Tiffany, I said, my voice steady and clear. You did that all on your own. I turned and walked out the door, leaving her standing alone in the entryway, her face a maelstrom of anger, fear, and for the first time, a sliver of regret. But it was far too late for that. I walked away from Tiffany's house, my heart hammering, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I should have felt triumphant, but I just felt hollow. The truth was out, raw and ugly, but it had solved nothing. It had only revealed the depth of her sickness. She had let her envy fester until it had twisted into something monstrous. When I got home, I found Justin in the living room. He looked up, his brow furrowing. "Hey, you okay?" The words caught in my throat. Was I okay? I didn't know. I sank onto the couch beside him. "I need to tell you something," I finally managed. So I told him. Everything. I watched as his expression shifted from concern to disbelief, and finally to a cold, hard fury. By the time I finished, his hands were clenched into fists. "She did what?" he said, his voice sharp. I nodded, swallowing against the lump in my throat. "I got the lab results. The cake had a sedative in it." He shot up from the couch, pacing the room. "Are you serious? Tiffany actually tried to drug you?" "Yes." A harsh, humorless laugh escaped him. "And she admitted it?" "She cracked," I said quietly. Justin turned to me, his eyes blazing. "She could have killed you, Amber. Or Harper." The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. I hadn't let myself truly process that reality until now. He ran a hand through his hair, his movements sharp with anger. "We're going to the police." I looked up, startled. "What? You heard me. This isn't some petty family squabble anymore. She committed a crime." I hesitated. A part of me wanted to, but I kept seeing Harper's small, confused face. If I pressed charges, Tiffany would be arrested. There would be investigations, custody battles, a public spectacle. Harper would be caught in the crossfire. And for what? To punish a woman who had already torched her own life? "Justin," I said, my voice shaky, "I want her to pay, but I don't want Harper to be the one who pays the price." His jaw was tight. "And what happens next time, Amber? What happens when she does this to someone else and doesn't get caught?" He was right. Tiffany was a danger. People like her didn't stop until they were forced to. I didn't sleep that night, the weight of the decision crushing me. By morning, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't a call to the police. It was a call to the one person who could make Tiffany truly answer for her actions, her husband. When Caleb opened the door, his expression was neutral, polite. "I need to talk to you," I said. He stepped aside. I had never been close to Caleb. He was a nice guy, but he seemed to exist in a state of willful ignorance about his wife's true nature. Not anymore. I sat across from him and placed the lab report on the coffee table. "What is this?" he asked. "Proof," I said. He picked it up. I watched his face pale as he read, his fingers tightening on the paper. "This." He trailed off, looking up at me, his eyes pleading. "Tell me this isn't real." "It's real, Caleb. She did this." His hands trembled as he set the paper down. "She could have hurt you." I nodded. She could have hurt Harper. His breath hitched. That was the moment. The moment his world fractured. The moment the weight of his wife's sins came crashing down on him. "She's sick," he whispered. "No," I corrected him, my voice firm. "She's cruel." A long silence passed between us. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I'll handle it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. And I believed him, because he had more to lose than anyone. The fallout was swift and brutal. Word spread through the family like a shockwave. It started with whispers. Something was wrong with Caleb and Tiffany. Then, the truth detonated. Within a week, Caleb had packed a bag, taken Harper, and moved in with his parents. Tiffany found herself utterly alone, standing in the smoldering ruins of the life she had so meticulously built. The first time I saw her after, she was a ghost of her former self. The perfect hair, the flawless makeup, the curated confidence, all gone. She looked smaller, hollowed out. I ran into her at the grocery store. She was hovering by the vegetables, her hand gripping the cart like a life raft. She saw me first. I felt her stare like a physical weight. "Are you happy now?" Her voice was a rasp, devoid of its old sharpness. I turned. "Excuse me?" "You got what you wanted," she said, her lips twisting into a bitter sneer. "You wanted to ruin me." "Congratulations." I stared at her, my expression unreadable. "You ruined yourself, Tiffany." She laughed, a broken sound. "I made one mistake, and my life is over." I crossed my arms. "One mistake?" My voice was quiet, but it cut through the air. "You spent years trying to tear me down. You got off on making me feel small. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to drug me." Her face contorted. "It wasn't poison. Then what was it?" She had no answer. I stepped closer. "You did this. Every lie, every cruel joke, every petty game. You built this prison, Tiffany. Now you have to live in it." Her nostrils flared, but the fight was gone. "You have no idea what I've lost," she whispered. I raised an eyebrow. "You lost a husband who finally saw you for who you are. You lost a family that's done enabling you. And if you're not careful, you're going to lose Harper for good." That hit the mark. Her face crumpled for a brief second before she wrestled it back into a mask of defiance. "I don't need your pity," she spat. "Good," I replied, "because you won't get any." And I walked away. The last I heard, she was living in a small apartment across town. She wasn't invited to family gatherings. No one called. Her entire identity had been built on control, on being the center of attention. The moment she lost her audience, she simply ceased to exist. Her exile wasn't a punishment I had enacted. It was the natural consequence of her own actions. She had never learned how to exist without an audience to manipulate. And now, in the crushing silence, she was finally, truly alone. Tiffany was gone. Not with a bang, but a whimper. There were no flashing lights, no courtroom drama. Her absence was a quiet, gaping hole where a loud, disruptive presence used to be. Her name became an unspoken word. It was as if she had been a character in a play who had been written out of the script. And maybe that was the most fitting punishment of all. Not public shame, but total irrelevance. The slow, dawning horror of realizing that nobody cared anymore. I thought I would feel a profound sense of relief, that the weight on my chest would finally lift. But closure is a funny thing. It sneaks up on you in quiet moments. It was there at the next family dinner when I found myself instinctively bracing for a snide comment that never came. It was there when I saw Harper, laughing and playing with her cousins, a light in her eyes I'd never seen before. She was thriving, free from the suffocating tension of a home that had been built on a foundation of lies. Her father, Caleb, was quieter now, more serious, but he was present in a way he never had been before. He was a father reborn. One evening, I found myself parked across the street from a drab apartment complex on the other side of town. I hadn't intended to come here. I don't know what I was looking for. A sign of remorse? A glimpse of her suffering? But all I saw was a row of dimly lit windows, all identical, and I realized I had wasted my time. I didn't need to see her misery. I already had my peace. Weeks turned into months. The seasons changed. One day, a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized the sharp, aggressive handwriting immediately. I sat on my front porch, the envelope feeling as heavy as a stone in my hand. Part of me wanted to shred it, to throw it away unread, but another part, a quieter part, needed to know. I slid the paper out. "Amber, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe me. But I've had a lot of time to think, and I see it now. I see what I became, and I hate it. I hate what I did to you. I hate what I did to Caleb. But most of all, I hate what I did to Harper. I know I don't deserve anything, not forgiveness, not understanding, but I needed you to know that I see it. and I am sorry. I don't know what happens now, but I hope one day my daughter can forgive me. That's all I want. Tiffany. I stared at the words, my fingers tight around the paper. Was it real? Was this genuine regret or just one last desperate manipulation? In the end, I realized it didn't matter. It was never about her apology. It was about my freedom. She had spent her life trying to write everyone else's story, but now she was trapped in the one she had written for herself. She had to wake up every morning in the exile she had built with her own 2 hands. That was justice. I folded the letter, walked inside, and tossed it into the fireplace. I watched as the flames licked at the edges, curling the paper into black ash until it was gone. Some things aren't meant to be held onto. Some things are meant to burn. And as the last ember faded, I took a slow, deep breath. It wasn't the breath of victory or of revenge. It was something better. It was the breath of freedom. If this story resonated with you, remember that choosing your own peace is often the most powerful form of justice. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the complexities of life and empower you to find your own strength. Your support means the world. The end of the story.